Pizza Tower is one of the biggest bombshells that has hit the indie gaming scene in recent memory, just celebrating its 1 year anniversary not too long ago as I'm recording this, and to say that its rise has been meteoric is probably an understatement. This game is one of the most unique, fast-paced and utterly ridiculous platformers that have been released in ages. The Wario Land inspirations, mixed with the fine-tuning of things like the incredible music, to the tight yet flowing controls that let you fly through the levels like a pinball with anxiety. No, seriously, this little Italian creature is mentally broken, he needs help and therapy. Oh yeah, speaking of that guy, Peppino is by far one of the most beloved parts of this game, and it's my firm belief that a large part of the love he's received is down to his animations and the sheer amount of care and personality that have been put into them. And I mean a lot has been put into them. The sprite rips from the Spriters resource, diligently performed by Random Talking Bush and Dogtoon64, thank you so much for your sacrifice, totals to nearly 5,300 sprites, each of which being a separate frame of animation. He has like 8 separate animations for walking and running alone, one of which having 50 goddamn frames. It seems like they just bloated his animation and it would feel like too much, but no. Instead they fill our main character here with so much life and personality while not feeling unnatural. So, let's start eating this extra large pizza one mouthful at a time and start dissecting how on earth they made this anxious little goblin one of the most emotive and fun to watch pixel art characters of all time, and how they managed to somehow shove this many animations into the game so seamlessly. Now, there's no way that we're going to be able to accurately dissect the sheer scale of Peppino's animations without understanding the art style of the game in general. So before we get into the man himself, let's identify some of the key overarching aspects of the game's pixel art, to get a more informed idea of how things work around here. It's pretty clear for anyone looking at this game that its pixel art is way different from anything else we normally see in other indie games, even the most aggressively detailed ones like Terraria. To use a bit of an analogy here, most pixel art we see in gaming is like a fully built statue, with the pixels being quite rigid in their shapes, or at least in enough of a structure to be easily read. This is mainly because, at least in my experience, the limited space that most sprites have to get across what they are means that things like character sprites need to be compact and concise, allowing players to easily understand them and enjoy them. If you try to play with the shapes of things like limbs too much while still trying to cram as many details as you can, such as complex lighting techniques, anti-aliasing and so on, then your sprite is likely to end up very messy and difficult to look at. So, with all of that said, while most pixel art is like a statue, the pixel art of Pizza Tower is like having a handful of wet clay and vaguely shaping it into what you want for a few seconds, before it falls over with a wet plop. The utterly unhinged nature of so many of these animations is something to behold. Just look at these charging animations for Pepperman, the first boss of the game. The hugely exaggerated size of his iron arm on the side charging at you makes this attack seem so much more impactful and dangerous, making this guy far more threatening than you may think when you hear that the first boss is just a sentient red pepper. Although that design choice does contribute to his threat in other ways, as obviously the red colour is a very simple way to establish a character as a threat, with the darker shades of red on the limbs in particular contrasting with his white gloves, to lead the player's attention to them far more, focusing them on Pepperman's most powerful asset, his brute strength. Pepperman is only one example of this game's art style being able to portray the personality and themes of its main characters through very extreme exaggerations and body breaking, while also using very simple yet concise colour palettes in order to grip the attention of the player immediately, not letting go until each character's appeal has been put on full display. Let's look at the limited colour depth that many of these sprites and even the larger pieces of art in this game, like the title cards, have, with most objects having one major colour with very little lighting or shading, one colour for each in most cases, or none at all. This fits in with the whole concept of keeping the focus on the insane animations and not the minor details of these sprites, making them way more readable than they otherwise would be, as well as continuing this MS Paint-like style that has become so easily recognisable. The basic colour depth combined with these very messy lines form the basis of this MS Paint vibe, which is an art program that is synonymous with baby's first digital art piece, which I shouldn't need to explain is never a masterpiece. Despite that negative presumption, this style also gives a strong sense of nostalgia for this era of art, with these goofy proportions and simple colours being quite charming despite how basic and potentially messy that they seem on the surface, making Pizza Tower far more charming and visually unique as a result, as this kind of style is very hard to pull off to this great of an extent. But it fits this game perfectly because it's utterly unserious. Half the enemies in this game are scared of you and your Italian rage, so the art style is allowed to be utterly unhinged and messy. It fits the chaos of the gameplay and concept very well. One last major theme within this game that applies to the characters in particular is the utterly insane amount of variation within their animations, and the sheer volume of things that they are allowed to do. This is most obviously present in Peppino, which we will get to later, but even most enemies have an unreal amount of animation that cover even the most niche of gameplay situations, making the players feel way more immersed into the chaos, encouraging them to mess around and try a ton of different approaches to demolish them, to see if they can find a brand new interaction. As an example of this huge number of animations across the board of this game, check out the sprite sheet for the fucking cheese slime. Like, why does this pathetic little sneeze of an enemy have this wild of a sprite sheet? It seems so hilariously unneeded, but it makes even the most pathetic looking guys in this game that much more expressive and likable as a result. And it makes me more upset that they didn't use this bat swinging animation. Like, why did they not include this? I am so sad and I really shouldn't be. Anyways, there are examples of this practice sprinkled in nearly every level of enemies having varied and appealing animations. From the Ghost King infecting all of these objects to give them a unique threat to them, to Kentucky Kenny, a glorified power-up box that shows up in a grand total of 1 level, becoming one of the most iconic parts of the stage for his simple swagger and hilarious proportions with that honker of a nose he's packing, with his scared animations just oozing personality with how exaggerated it is. Torta Pizza really didn't have to add this much texture and life into all of these enemies, but the insane effort and variance that they put into every piece of this game makes it one of the most alive and energetic platformers of all time in my opinion. And of course, nowhere is this meticulous attention to detail more apparent than with everyone's favourite traumatised pizza shop owner. So, with all of that preamble behind us, let's finally dig into the man himself, Peppino, and why he has become such an internet icon in just a year. Peppino as a character is one of the best parts about this game for a number of reasons, the most commonly agreed upon of which being just how pathetic and funny he is. Now, this game's biggest inspiration is the Wario Land series, and the main character from those games, Wario of course, is a money-hungry, chunky and unapologetic little rat who'll rob people and fart around without a care in the world. This is backed up by the gameplay of this series, many aspects of which Pizza Tower directly took, such as the main character being unable to be killed by regular enemies, attacks like the shoulder barge, and the plethora of power-ups that alter the look and gameplay of our hero in each level. The key difference here, however, is the personality of these two couldn't be more contrasting, with Wario having that massive soul kind of confidence that makes him a funny protagonist to laugh with and at, while Peppino is basically allergic to any form of confidence. His regular walking animation portrays him as a scared and unstable guy, with his apprehensive tiptoe walk with those fearful eyes coming together to make what is likely the first gameplay animation the player sees a clear and memorable showing of Peppino's personality. However, that instability with Peppino isn't just shown in his fearful side, as his running animations show this fear being replaced with a brutal anger and level of stress that gives the player the sense of power that such centralizing parts of his moveset should have. The two main running animations, one for the regular charge and one for when you hit max speed, both have lower than average frame counts for this game, with the normal run having a tiny 3 frames, and the crazy one having a larger but still low 8 frames, giving them a more frantic and energetic feel to them, which keeps players excited and raring to keep moving forward, flattening everything in your way. This destructive prowess for the running animations is further shown in the body breaking and exaggerated proportions we see here, with the parts I would like to highlight in particular being the eyes and mouth. Normally you would expect the limbs to be portraying the majority of a charging attack's power. We saw exactly this with Pepperman earlier, but Peppino continues to differentiate himself from the rest of the game, with his crazed and frantic facial expression being front and center here, both making the animation unique compared to most other games, and their main attacking option, and putting Peppino's frantic personality in full focus even more, as instead of, you know, putting your damn arm in front of you to charge, he's wrecking brick walls with his whole head, and he is not stopping for anyone. Moving on to the rest of his attacks and basic moves, the jumping animations, including the super jump, use a technique called squat and stretch stretched the most dramatically of nearly all of his animations, with this technique being one of the most commonly used across any cartoony animation. It's been covered to death across God knows how many videos about animation, so to keep it short, to make an impact such as jumping or landing more impactful, animators can stretch out or squish down a body to make it seem more weighty and heavy, making the animation more satisfying and extreme for viewers. And many of these frames take this and push it right to the limit, completely pancaking the guy and making the anticipation and impact of these jumps so much greater, making them far more fun to use. His grabbing and item holding animations are pretty basic, at least for this game standards, with the main draw being the body breaking of his arms and fists, which both help with gameplay by making the grabbing hitboxes very apparent and easy to read amongst the chaos, and it makes things like the punch attack he can perform after grabbing more impactful and fun to use, as bigger fist must equal bigger punch. That should cover at least the majority of the major basic actions that our character can make. So let's start getting a bit more specific with our analysis and look at some of the more obscure animations to really highlight the attention to detail that we talked about earlier. I'm gonna rapid fire through a bunch of them so that this doesn't take up like half an hour. So here we go. The two angry walking animations fits pretty well with when you start feeling unstoppable after racking up high combos, which is where these start appearing, really heightening the energy and enjoyment that we feel when we get on a roll in this game. The damage and death animations all incorporate very few frames to make them feel very frantic and chaotic, making them feel a lot more dangerous and panic-inducing for players, sharing some of the fear that poor old Peppino is probably feeling in the moment with the player, putting them on high alert which encourages them to recover and get back to their combo. Very good stuff here. I have no major analysis for this falling animation. I just find it's really cool that they animated an entirely unique thing for falling a certain distance, while turning, while running as well. It really shows you how meticulous these animators were. The super taunt animations blow Peppino up significantly to take up way more of the screen, putting way more emphasis on these hilarious and cartoony poses where the eyes and mouth in particular really exaggerate the pride Peppino is feeling, giving the player way more satisfaction when they pull off the super taunt. Also, this one is a reference to Wario Land Gold, which we all know inspired the gameplay so heavily, so that's neat too. Peppino has a couple of sprites exclusively for boss fights, such as the scream when he starts most of them, which really pump up the energy before the fight begins, as not only does the size of his mouth double his freaking height, but it pairs with the scream sound effects perfectly to make these bosses seem way more scary to the player. Alright, that's most of the animations I want to cover in Peppino's base form, but that's nowhere near the extent of the animation work that went into our protagonist, as we have an exorbitant amount of power-ups, level gimmicks and so on, that's all at Peppino going through some form of goofy and sometimes painful situation that varies up the gameplay in all sorts of ways, and of course, gives us a ton more pixels to chew on, although I imagine that would be pretty painful. These things are sharp. Anyways, some of the more basic transformations are the two gun-based ones, the revolver and the shotgun, and the main appeal of these two shouldn't have to be explained, they're goddamn guns. However, the shotgun is by far the more interesting to talk about, as while the simple and effective shooting animation of the revolver does its job at making the recoil of the shot believable, but the shotgun in the context of the game is meant to be a complete powerhouse in comparison. The first time you're expected to get it is at the end of a level where you've been terrorized by 4 animatronics, so being able to grab a shotgun and blast them all to Kingdom Come as revenge is viscerally satisfying. And the animation backs this up brilliantly. The massive size of the particle effects of the shot especially make the power of the blast that much more apparent, helping to make this one of the most simple yet fun power-ups in the game, assisted by the new stomping animation, making even the non-shooting parts of the power-up look more deadly, as the enlarged feet make the weight of the attack far greater. This is just one obvious example of how the animation of this game has been used to make the power-ups feel amazing to use, but there are so many more examples scattered all over this game. The Fire Breath power-up uses a similar huge particle effect, which makes the flame look dangerous, which makes the dash move where Peppino launches himself with the fire seem uncontrollable and damaging as hell. Then there's the extreme smear of the sliding animation of the Night transformation, which gives it a great sense of speed, especially when mixed with the size of the armor, which gives it a lot of weight as well. There's just a ton of examples of these power-ups having great animation that makes them way more fun to use. Of course, not all of these animations are made to make the power-up feel powerful, such as the sausage or the rocket, both of which are meant to convey speed and a lack of control as Peppino is getting dragged along for the ride. The bounciness of the sausage mount gives it a lot of energy and fun appeal, almost like the sausage is excited and happy running around through the level as Peppino clings on for dear life. But the rocket takes this excitement and replaces it with utter terror, as this poor guy is getting launched. The turning animation in particular with this thing really portrays just how hard Peppino is having to try to wrestle back control over this thing, with the strained, blown up expression really showing how much power is behind those engines, making the speed and destructive chaos of the rocket way more apparent, which fits with the auto-scroll-like nature of the power. The level gimmick side of Peppino's animations follow a pretty similar theme to the power-ups, but they don't really need to focus as much on making the player feel powerful, because that's not often the goal, with some gimmicks like the banana peel focusing more on the comedy factor with this blank, void expression that just screams, "Oh shit," as you get launched through the air with no control. That's pretty much the centralizing theme of most of these animations that come from level gimmicks, just giving the player a fun look at Peppino getting flung about against his will, and how he usually isn't very pleased about it. The rat balloon shows the man hanging on for dear life. The Mr. Pinch animation is just terror incarnate. These animations are mostly consolidated to individual levels and make each one feel that more unique and special whenever you play them, keeping the journey fresh the whole way through, and giving players something to look a bit closer at as well. All of these little specific animations are, in my opinion, one of the best showcases for how crazy the detail is for Peppino, and is why he has become so much of an icon in the gaming scene. He gives us so much personality in an unreal amount of ways, in every part of this game, and the quality and unique aspect of this animation style shows that personality masterfully, overall giving us an amazing main character and showcase of the strange yet incredible limits of pixel art as a medium. Pizza Tower is a special game. One of those games that truly push what both platformers and indie games as a whole can be, being one of the most unique and innovative gaming experiences that has come out in recent memory. And the art direction of this game exemplifies that so well. It's genuinely inspiring to see such a strange yet well executed art style succeed on such a large scale, and it gets me so excited not only to see what these developers can make next, but what other indie devs are going to do, knowing that this seemingly unhinged style can work if you put as much care as Tour de Pizza did. But with all of that said, thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to shoulder bash that subscribe button, and as always, I'll see you when I see you. Bye!